What happens when a J-pop idol stands on stage and risks everything just to say 2 words, "I'm gay"? In a country where silence is safer than the truth, Shinjiro Atae doesn't just come out, he does it all. With grace, strength, and a message that reaches thousands. You don't have to hide to be loved. Would you risk your image just to live your truth? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Your voice matters. We celebrate every story of courage and proudly stand with LGBTQ+ communities everywhere. From the outside, Shinjiro Atae lived the dream most people can only dream of. As a standout member of the Japanese co-ed pop group AAA, he had it all: fame, fans, perfect looks, and a carefully crafted image that made him everything the industry and society expected of him. He debuted at the age of 14, caught up in the whirlwind of J-pop stardom, where discipline was a matter of survival and image was everything. By his 20s, Shinjiro had become more than just a celebrity. He was the embodiment of the perfect idol. In glossy magazines, he was the charming but shy boy. On stage, he shone with the sweet boy next door vibe. In the conservative world of Japanese entertainment, where deviation from normal can lead to career ruin, Shinjiro plays his role perfectly. Always polite, always smiling, always safe. And yet, behind every rehearsed interview and every wave to cheering fans, there is a man who quietly disappears. Because while the world praises the version they want to see, the real Shinjiro is left alone, silenced by his own success. The Japanese entertainment industry is notorious for its unwritten rules. Idols cannot date, cannot get involved in politics, and certainly cannot be gay. The illusion of perfection must be maintained. It's not just a professional expectation, it's a cultural one. In a society still tightly bound by traditional gender roles and conservative family ideals, being different isn't just frowned upon, it can make you invisible. Shinjiro understood this from the start, and so while his peers developed their identities in silence, he learned to live behind glass. Always present but never truly seen. Over the years, he had cultivated an image that the world loved. But that love came at a price. The pressure to be perfect wasn't just external, it was internal. He wasn't allowed to have bad days. He wasn't allowed to express desires or fears that might expose the truth he kept hidden. The more praise he received, the deeper he sank into an untrue version of himself. And in that space, behind the lights and the glamour and the sold-out concerts, he began to feel something even more painful than rejection: erasure. Behind closed doors, Shinjiro's life was built on constant caution. Every interaction was calculated, every word rehearsed. He learned how to dodge questions, how to dismiss assumptions, how to project warmth without revealing vulnerability. There were no role models for him. No public idols to look up to, no roadmap for how to survive in an industry that required you to hide the truth in exchange for applause. And so he did what many do in silence. He became 2 people. A public figure adored by fans and a private person yearning for freedom. This duality took its toll. There were nights on tour where the hotel room walls were cages, mornings where the mirror reflected a stranger, birthday greetings filled with fake joy, interviews where the real answers stuck in the throat. Behind the scenes, he was falling apart. But no one could see it, because he was too good at pretending, too good at surviving. Yet there were cracks in the performance. Subtle, quiet moments where the real him struggled to breathe. A lyric he didn't write but felt deeply. A fan message that struck a hidden note. A quiet longing in his eyes that only those who shared his secret could see. But he kept going, because stopping wasn't an option. And admitting the truth? It was scary. To many, Shinjiro Atae seemed like a lucky man, admired by millions, successful in every way, living a life most would envy. But what good is admiration when it comes with conditions? When your dreams are built on silence? When your love, your truest, most human feeling, must be erased for the comfort of others? He was surrounded by people, yet felt utterly alone. Not because they didn't care, but because they didn't know. Or maybe they didn't want to know. In a country where being different often meant being left behind, Shinjiro silently bore the weight of invisibility. He smiled when he wanted to scream, he performed when he was in pain, He gave the world his voice, but never his truth. That's the heartbreaking irony of fame in a world that doesn't let you be yourself. The louder the applause, the harder it becomes to ask for help. Because people don't see the pain behind the perfection. They don't ask what's missing from a life that seems perfect. And for Shinjiro, no one asked. Until one day, he couldn't pretend anymore. Because behind the cameras, behind the carefully crafted image, lives a truth too powerful to hide. When the lights came on, he lit up the room. When the music started, he gave it his all. Every performance, every appearance, every public moment was perfect. To the world, Shinjiro Atae was J-pop's golden boy, kind, charming, and a total pro. But what was the truth? The truth was that every time he stood in the spotlight, he was hiding. Behind the smile was silence. Behind the elegance was exhaustion. And behind the applause was a heart that kept beating with the question, what if they found out? For more than a decade, Shinjiro lived a life of contradictions. He was hailed as a role model, but he lived in fear of the truth. He was loved for his integrity, but every aspect of his public persona was carefully curated, filtered, and stripped of anything that might suggest he was different. While fans praised his gentle charm, kind eyes, and dedication to his work, Shinjiro carried a secret that was slowly eroding his sense of self. He didn't just hide his sexuality, he hid his truth, his voice, his right to be human. In his early years, he did what many gay people in the public eye were forced to do. He isolated himself. On stage, he played the role of a lovesick boy, sang about love, and joked about future wives in interviews, knowing full well that he couldn't even utter the word boyfriend without risking everything. He goes to work every day wearing a mask so intricately crafted that he begins to forget where the performance ends and Shinjiro really begins. He has become a master at erasing himself. The industry doesn't require him to lie outright, nor does it require him to. The pressure is unspoken, but it's crushing. He doesn't dare to love openly, doesn't dare to speak too freely, doesn't dare to wear certain clothes or express himself too boldly. Everything, his hair, his laugh, the way he looks at his friends, is calculated. Because in the world he lives in, the smallest gesture can lead to suspicion, and suspicion can lead to destruction. This isn't just about protecting a career, it's about survival. And perhaps the most painful irony of all, while he spent years building hope for others, performing songs that gave courage, appearing in films that inspired confidence, he himself felt like a fraud. How could he encourage his fans to live authentically when he himself was trapped in a closet without a key? How can you preach self-love when you're afraid of your own reflection? It was a silent torment, simmering beneath every fan meeting, every hotel night, every award speech. There's a kind of loneliness that comes from being seen but not known. And the pressure didn't stop when the camera stopped rolling. Deep inside, he carried layers of guilt. Guilt for lying by hiding, guilt for withdrawing, guilt for being afraid of who he was. There were moments, too many to count, when he wondered if he would ever be free, or if freedom would cost him everything he'd worked so hard to achieve. But despite it all, he kept going. Day after day, smiling, working, performing. Not because he liked the mask, but because, like many gay people, he didn't believe there was any other option. You learn to survive, you learn to adapt, you learn to numb the pain and call it discipline. But make no mistake, this isn't living. This is existing under a glass wall of fear. Sometimes the most dangerous thing is not hatred, it's invisibility. And for years, Shinjiro Atae was forced to live as a shadow of himself. A Shinjiro who was charming but not too soft, stylish but not too bold, loving, but never in a way that raised questions. And yet, something inside him kept whispering, a soft, deep voice that kept asking, when will it be my turn? Once a secret, now a storm that shook every corner of the room. Because no matter how much you hide your truth, it doesn't go away. It waits, it grows, it becomes the very thing that tears away your mask and demands to be seen. And when that moment finally comes, when a person decides to live, not just survive, it is the most terrifying, the most tortuous. We want to hear from you. because your voice matters. If there's one lesson we've learned from Shinjiro's journey, it's that courage isn't always forgotten. Sometimes, true courage is found in the quiet moments, when you sit alone with your truth, nurture it, and wait for the day you're strong enough to let it breathe. Have you ever hidden your true self just to be accepted? Have you ever looked in the mirror and wondered if the world would still love you if you showed them your truth? We don't just tell stories. We celebrate every soul who chooses honesty over approval, authenticity over expectation. Because in a world that constantly tells you to shrink, to hide, to fit in, choosing to stand up and be yourself is the boldest and most powerful act of all. Liberating, the most beautiful act. Not every life-changing moment comes with fireworks or applause. Some happen quietly, slowly, steadily, almost imperceptibly. For Shinjiro Atae, the moment everything changed wasn't marked by a public collapse or scandal. It was quieter than that. It was the thousands of small pains he endured on his own, bowing to cheers while feeling like a ghost in his own life. Each moment passed like a whisper, but together. The real turning point? It was the growing truth he couldn't help but see. The haunting sense that pretending to be someone else wasn't just tiring, it was unbearable. And so he chose something different. Not louder, not flashier, just more real, more himself. The seed was planted during one of his many trips abroad. Initially, these trips were just escapes from the stifling expectations of Japanese showbiz. But then they became deeper, a glimpse into a parallel reality where people like him lived openly, loved freely, and didn't carry shame like a second skin. In Los Angeles, he walked past a pride mural without anyone batting an eye. In New York, he saw a gay couple kissing on the subway and felt a pang in his gut, not of judgment, but of desire. These weren't just unfamiliar sights, they were new discoveries, and they made him dizzy. The contrast couldn't be more stark. In Japan, where fitting in often means surviving, Shinjiro has been taught from a young age to keep his identity a secret. In a culture that values silence over self-expression, being openly different, especially in matters of identity, is like crossing a line from which you can't return. For years, he's lived with that silent fear, so ingrained it's like a second skin. But something is changing inside him. The burden of hiding, of smiling when he feels unseen, is beginning to weigh on him. He has everything society says will make him happy. Success, admiration, financial freedom. Yet none of it can fill the void left by self-rejection. And the pain of not being yourself, that's the biggest thing of all. So he made a choice that was both terrifying and necessary. He stepped away from the spotlight. Quietly, without fanfare, Shinjiro put his entertainment career on hold and moved to California. Not as an idol, but as a student. For the first time in decades, he allowed himself to be anonymous. He walked around town without makeup. He sat in class without worrying about camera angles. He studied psychology and sociology, but what he was really studying was himself. Who was he without the pressure to please others? Without dancing? Without silence? During his years away from home, Shinjiro became obsessed with keeping a diary. Page after page, he poured out the questions he had been afraid to ask. What if his fans hated him? What if they loved him more? He wrote letters to his younger self, letters filled with compassion, regret, and hope. He went to therapy. He cried through therapy sessions. He confronted the inner shame that had plagued him since childhood, and slowly, day by day, he began to heal. He began to speak too, at first in whispers, then in full sentences. He came out to a close friend, a moment he describes as one of the most terrifying of his life. He stammered, tears welling up in his eyes, but was met with a warm hug and a simple reply, "Thank you for believing in me." That moment changed everything. It gave him permission. Permission to exist, permission to dream, permission to imagine a future where his truth was not a burden, but a light. As the pandemic hit and the world slowed down, Shinjiro's inner workings accelerated. Isolation gave him the space to ask deeper questions. Why was I really afraid? Who was I trying to protect? And eventually the answer became clear. He wasn't protecting himself. He was protecting an illusion that would never love him. And that illusion was enough. By early 2023, Shinjiro knew he was ready. Not just emotionally, but mentally. This wouldn't be a press release or a Twitter post. He wanted to do it his way, honestly, from the heart, and directly to the people who had loved him through it all. He worked with a small, trusted team to create a private fan event. There would be no media, no cameras, just him and his fans in a room, sharing his truth. Have you ever had to choose between safety and truth? How did that change you? Share your thoughts in the comments, because stories like Shinjiro's aren't just for viewing, they're for feeling, for thinking, for remembering. We celebrate every voice that dares to speak its truth. We stand with Shinjiro, and we proudly stand with the LGBTQ+ community, anytime, anywhere. It was a night that changed a country. On July 26, 2023, at the Line Cube Shibuya Theater in Tokyo, a soft, trembling voice cut through the silence, shattering decades of tradition, expectation, and fear. Under warm stage lights and surrounded by nearly 2,000 fans, Shinjiro Atae stood alone. But for the first time in his life, he did not hide. The moment did not come with a pop beat or flashy choreography. It did not come with backup dancers or a screaming crowd. Instead, it came with silence, with truth. Clutching a piece of paper in his hand, Shinjiro's voice trembled as he looked out at the sea of loyal fans who had grown up with his music, his face, and his carefully crafted image. "I respect you and believe you deserve to hear this directly from me," he began. The room fell silent. "For years I have struggled to accept a part of myself. But now, after everything I have been through, I finally have the courage to open up to everyone. I am gay." In a single breath, Japan's traditionally closed entertainment industry erupted. Some gasped, some cried, and many stood in stunned silence, feeling the raw honesty of a man who had been a national icon for more than a decade. The room erupted in tears, not just his own, but those of fans holding hands, strangers holding hands in solidarity, love, and respect. Some cried silently into tissues, others spontaneously clapped, chanting his name as if to build a wall of support around him. A few people rushed to hug him as security held back the line, but they couldn't contain their emotions. It wasn't a performance. It was a release. The power of that confession resonated far beyond the walls of the venue. Social media exploded in minutes. News outlets across Japan and Asia were racing to cover what had just happened. A J-pop star, a former member of the mega group AAA, had just done the unthinkable in Japanese pop culture. He had come out, and he didn't just come out quietly. He came out with love, clarity, and a message that reached millions, especially young people who had been quietly struggling with those same truths. "I want to live my truth," he said. The words, simple as they were, echoed across Twitter, television, and TikTok with the weight of a revolution. In Japan, where social conformity often overshadows individuality, coming out is still seen by many as dangerous, both personally and professionally. Few public figures dare to do it. The stakes are high, losing careers, advertising contracts, even families. But Shinjiro isn't just taking a risk, he's forging a path. What makes this moment historic isn't just that he said it, it's who said it. Shinjiro Atae, a face who has graced magazine covers, TV dramas, and J-pop stadiums. A man whose every move is carefully considered, shaped, and scrutinized. For someone like him to say, "I'm gay," isn't just personal, it's political, it's cultural. The response from his fellow artists was swift and supportive. Messages of love poured in from both Japanese and international stars, some of whom had never spoken publicly about LGBTQ+ rights before. It was as if Shinjiro's courage had sparked something latent in others. Fans posted stories of their own coming-out journeys, often tagging him with gratitude. Parents wrote about how his speech helped them understand their children better. The ripple effect didn't stop there. LGBTQ+ advocacy groups across Japan called it a turning point in visibility. Shinjiro had not only shared his identity, but had sparked a nationwide conversation about what it means to be gay, visible and loved in a society that still favors silence. In the days that followed, sales of his books skyrocketed. Rather than shrinking, his fan base grew. But more importantly, it grew. His supporters are no longer just cheering for their idols, they are standing with the people. the boy who danced through his pain, the young man who smiled through his fear, and now the adult artist who has found his voice. What happened that night was not just a confession, but a redefinition of courage, of masculinity, of what it means to be a role model in Asia today. If Shinjiro's journey has touched something in you, if it's made you feel understood, challenged your perspective, or simply given you a little hope, we want to hear. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We don't just share stories, we celebrate every soul who dares to live life to the fullest without regret. Because in a world that teaches us to be silent, choosing to be yourself is the greatest and bravest truth of all. When Shinjiro Atae spoke his truth, it wasn't just a career-defining moment. It was a soul-defining moment. And while the headlines focused on his coming out, the real story began afterward, after the applause died down and the world returned to its usual chaos. In that silence, Shinjiro began the quiet, unobtrusive work of healing, and it changed everything. For a long time, he had performed not just for his fans, but for his own survival. Every smile, every interview answer, every outfit was carefully calculated to hide a truth he thought would destroy him. But the moment he chose to stop hiding, he discovered something revolutionary. The freedom to exist was stronger than the fear of rejection. That freedom gave way to joy. Real joy. Not the superficial glitz of the spotlight, but the deep, quiet joy of waking up in the morning and no longer being afraid of who you are. For the first time in years, Shinjiro felt whole. No more double lives. No more whispers of truth in the dark. In this new chapter, he wasn't chasing vanity, he was chasing purpose. He was writing a book not about fame, but about vulnerability. In it, he stripped away the mask of idolatry and spoke directly to the vulnerable child inside each of us. The child still afraid, still searching, still ashamed. He wrote with a breathtaking honesty, and the fans responded, not with screams, but with letters, thousands of letters, from young people in Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, even the Middle East, places where coming out is still too risky. You gave me the courage to speak up, they wrote. You made me believe that I was not broken. But Shinjiro knew that telling stories wasn't enough. He wanted to build something. So he launched a series of mental health workshops specifically for LGBTQ+ youth. Safe spaces for people struggling with identity, trauma, and self-esteem in a society that still favors silence. These weren't performances. They were shelters. He sat in circles, not on stages. He listened as much as he spoke, and in every shaky question, every tearful confession, he saw himself. A younger version, a scared version. And he met them not as a star, but as a survivor. What set Shinjiro apart wasn't just his courage to speak up. It was his ability to turn his pain into a platform. Global organizations began to take notice. Campaigns celebrating the resilience of LGBTQ+ communities in Asia began to use his image, not as an icon, but as a symbol of strength. He became the first Japanese pop idol to openly represent the queer community in major international partnerships on mental health. His presence was not only comforting, but also challenging. It said, we exist, we thrive, we belong here too. And perhaps most powerful of all, his relationship with his fans changed. Before, his fandom worshipped the perfect image, aloof, beautiful. Now they loved the person behind the mask. A man who laughed louder, spoke softer, and cried when necessary. A man who no longer filtered the truth for comfort. Teenagers began showing up to meetings, wearing pride badges and carrying notebooks filled with handwritten poems about survival. Parents came too, some with fear, others with gratitude. They hugged him, not just because he sang their favorite song, but because he had become their child's lifeline. Shinjiro never thought he would become an icon, but he embraced the responsibility with humility and enthusiasm. I am not a leader, he often said. I am just a man who stopped running. And in that stopping, he started a movement, a gentle, steady movement. A movement that said healing was possible. A movement that said you don't have to be loud to be strong. A movement that said even in a society that values silence, your truth still matters. What do you keep hearing in his interviews, his speeches, his late-night musings? I'm not just free, I'm finally alive. And in that aliveness, Shinjiro Atae has become more than a pop star. He's become a mirror for millions who have never seen themselves properly reflected. He's become a bridge between generations, a vessel for change, and a quiet but steadfast force for those still waiting for their moment to speak up. So if you're video this and wondering if being true to yourself is worth the risk, look at Shinjiro. Shame didn't win. Silence didn't win. Only love did. When Shinjiro Atae first appeared on stage, he was the embodiment of refined perfection. The kind of idol the Japanese entertainment industry treasures. Respectful, quiet, uncontroversial. He was trained not just to sing and dance, but also to never stumble, never stray, never let the mask crack. And he didn't, for years. Even when the silence inside him grew deafening. Even when he looked in the mirror and no longer recognized the boy smiling back. For much of his career, Shinjiro played two roles, the public one that won hearts and the private one that broke them. He could have gone on, many have. He could have lost himself in nostalgia, quietly disappeared, or lived a life of gentle escapism. But something inside him had changed. It wasn't a loud awakening, it came slowly, like light through a closed door. A slow realization that the price of silence wasn't just emotional, it was spiritual. He wasn't just hiding a lover, he was hiding his true self, and that realization, over time, became impossible to ignore. When Shinjiro Atae stepped onto the stage at Line Cube Shibuya, he wasn't just there as a former pop idol. He was a man standing on the edge of everything he had ever feared, and choosing the truth. In front of 2,000 fans, his voice wavered, but his resolve didn't. "I am gay," he said, not as a performance, but as a release. It wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. It was quiet, genuine, and unchangeable. And in that moment, Shinjiro didn't just speak his truth, he rewrote his future. No longer bound by the silence he had carried for so long, he stepped into the light. Not as a celebrity, but as himself. Finally, completely free. But what happened next was even more astonishing. The world didn't turn away, his fans didn't abandon him, his value didn't disappear. In fact, it grew. For the first time, people saw more than a performer. They saw him for who he was, the vulnerable, thoughtful, brave person behind the music, behind the practiced gestures. And for countless others, especially young LGBTQ+ people across Asia, his truth lit a path they'd never seen before. In a place where queer identity is often erased, denied, or at best quietly tolerated, Shinjiro's voice broke the silence. He didn't just come out. He showed what it means to come out with dignity, love, and without shame. He didn't yell, he didn't accuse, he simply spoke the truth. And sometimes, that's the best thing you can do. His story has transcended entertainment. It has sparked national headlines, international interviews, and global reflection. But perhaps the most powerful ripples are the ones we don't see. A teenager in rural Japan whispering "Me too." A mother holding her son a little tighter, a corner quietly opening in someone's heart, enough to let a little light in. And Shinjiro doesn't stop at. He turns it into connection. Through interviews, documentaries, and his own ever-evolving presence, he has opened up space for others to feel less alone. He has proven that vulnerability is not a weakness. It's the strength to let go of the shell. He reminds people that authenticity is not a luxury. It's a right. A right not granted by pain, but by love. Today, Shinjiro isn't defined by chart-topping hits or loud crowds. It's deeper than fame, quieter, but far more enduring. His true impact is a wave of courage, spreading to those still learning to love themselves. He doesn't just come out, he opens a door for others to walk through. In a world where silence is often safer, Shinjiro has become a quiet revolution, a reminder that power isn't measured by volume, but by truth. He's not a symbol of perfection, he's a symbol of possibility. And for anyone still afraid to speak up, he's living proof. You don't have to be brave to be free. You just have to start, even if your voice is shaky. If Shinjiro's story moves you, let it inspire you to take action. Speak your truth, let someone know they're not alone. You don't need a stage to matter. You just need the courage to live your truth. Because Shinjiro didn't just free himself. He opened the door for millions of others. So what will you do with your truth? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. In a world where difference is still punished, choosing the truth is the bravest act of all. His story reminds us that authenticity is not only a personal journey, it's also a lifeline for those still searching for courage. Thank you for being here and joining us on this journey. If this video touches something deep inside you, please support us by following us and discovering more meaningful stories. And if you're one of our most honest and sensitive viewers, we want to hear from you. Your voice makes us stronger. We stand with the LGBTQ+ community wherever they are.